This is Letter from America. Today's topic is Zimbabwe is crumbling because of ZANU PF pandemic, corruption and violence. The news about ZANU PF MP for Gokwe Nembudzia, Justice Mayor Wajirajena's arrest in connection with fraud and money laundering will be hailed by ZANU PF apologists that the rule of law prevails and that no one in Zimbabwe is above the law. There are even some projections that as a result of his arrest and court-ordered seizure of his properties, Wajirajena's empire is on the verge of collapse. Authorities seized his Porsche cars and 22 trucks in connection with the fraud and money laundering charges involving $5 million COTCO misappropriated funds. But to say Wajirajena's arrest is proof that the rule of law is supreme in Zimbabwe is a false narrative. Many ZANU PF members, officials and supporters have been arrested for corruption and violence. None of them is in jail. The jail is full of human rights activists like Job Zikala, Godfrey Sitole and others who have dared raise their voices against ZANU PF's rampant corruption and violence. ZANU PF insiders say the real reason Wajirajena was arrested was he was flaunting or boasting too much in public about his wealth. In so doing, he was exposing ZANU PF corrupt wealth to the masses. ZANU PF now fears that the more Zimbabweans know and see just how much wealth in form of properties and luxury cars ZANU PF has accumulated, the more Zimbabweans will arise in mass demonstrations. Wajirajena's case, like other ZANU PF arrests, will not go anywhere because it will implicate other top ZANU PF officials. He got bail on his first court appearance. Right now, he is enjoying his affluent life in his mansion. There is a code of silence among ZANU PF looters. Each looter is required to enjoy his or her share of the loot in silence for fear of provoking public anger and mass protests. Corruption in Zimbabwe is costing the nation more than $2 billion US dollars per year. If corruption was reduced by 50%, $1 billion US dollars could have transformed Zimbabwe into possibly a middle-class economy. The country would be flourishing with modern school and health facilities. The country's infrastructure in terms of roads, bridges, modern transportation, water supply, electricity, agriculture would be the envy of Africa today. Many Zimbabweans who lived before independence now speak out in their comparison of the infrastructure under Ian Smith's Rhodesia more than 42 years ago and today under Mnangagwa regime. Almost all of them say despite Smith's oppressive rule, the infrastructure in Rhodesia was a lot better than today. While Ian Smith represented the settler colonial rule, where Africans did not have any basic human rights, Zimbabweans today have fond memories of a time in Rhodesia when consumer goods, transportation services, health and educational systems were available at a level much higher than in Zimbabwe today. One glaring difference between Ian Smith and the late Mugabe and now Mnangagwa's regime is Ian Smith never persecuted white Rhodesians, but he was ruthless in persecuting blacks, but never the whites. Ian Smith is reported to have killed an estimated 20,000 Africans, but hardly any white man or woman. The reason was Ian Smith was very protective of his fellow whites. In a remarkable contrast, Mugabe and Mnangagwa killed an estimated 30,000 black Zimbabweans, most of them from the Gukurahundi atrocities in the 1980s. Impoverishing and killing Zimbabweans are the roots of widespread dissatisfaction against the Mnangagwa regime today. A survey last year of Zimbabweans showed how angry and concerned they are about their socio-economic status under the ZANU PF government. The survey results showed that ZANU PF under President Mnangagwa is acutely aware of the volcanic anger rumbling beneath the apparently serene Zimbabwean environment. There is glaring evidence of the worsening situation for most Zimbabweans, coupled with rampant corruption and the systematic and sustained repression of black basic human rights in open violation of the international protocols on freedom of expression defined by the United Nations, African Union, and SADC. These conditions are all coming into a collision with the rapidly changing demography of the country. More than 70% of the 15 million Zimbabweans are under 30 years of age. This means they were born after independence and have no sustainable recollection of the pre-colonial era and the often touted struggle for independence. Almost every day, ZANU has and continues to blow the mantra ZANU yakasunungura nyika ino neropa, or ZANU liberated this country with blood. And they use this mantra to justify that only ZANU PF can and should rule the country indefinitely. The problem with this slogan is it is wearing off like a broken record. It no longer carries any meaning to today's youthful Zimbabwe. What ZANU PF is closing its eyes and ears to is the question: if you liberated us, what have you done for us? In response, ZANU PF is singing another song. Sanctions are hurting the economy. But the Zimbabweans don't believe this either. After 42 years in power, anything ZANU says now to justify its continued rule has totally lost credibility among Zimbabweans, as survey results show. The survey results show that more than 70% of Zimbabweans believe corruption and economic mismanagement are the root causes of the declining economic conditions and quality of life. ZANU PF has been ruling the country for 42 years, but the overall quality of life has been fluctuating and generally below average. The number of Zimbabweans in extreme poverty has reached 7.9 million as the pandemic has delivered another economic shock to the country. This is more than one half of the country's population of now 15 million. According to the World Bank's Economic and Social Update report, almost half of the Zimbabwean population fell into extreme poverty between 2018 and last year, with children bearing the brunt of that misery. Faced with these grim statistics, it is glaringly evident that ZANU PF cannot answer the question, what have you done for me in the past 42 years, without risking a no confidence vote. None of the ZANU PF campaign slogans show what they have done for Zimbabweans. They only show what they plan to do for Zimbabweans after the next elections. But ZANU PF knows that they cannot easily lose in free and fair. They can very easily lose in free and fair elections. This is why, election after election, ZANU PF has resorted to two strategies to win elections. One, violence and threatening people. ZANU PF have used the mantra that ZANU PF cannot be defeated by the ballot, what they won by the bullet. The message is clearly that ZANU PF will use and has used violence to intimidate people into voting for it. The use of force is evident in the way the opposition CCC under Chamisa is being prevented from visiting rural areas in the country. ZANU PF mobs have been deployed to block the roads CCC President Nelson Chamisa uses to visit the rural areas. In one instance, a bullet hit Chamisa's car while he was traveling in Manicaland province. Chamisa narrowly escaped. The SADC guidelines and the Constitution of Zimbabwe allows Zimbabweans to travel freely around the country. Second, rigging elections. ZANU PF knows too well that it is becoming increasingly difficult to intimidate people. Election after election, Zimbabweans have massively voted against ZANU PF. For this reason, ZANU PF has resorted to rigging elections. Evidence of this is well documented in many publications by human rights activists. The Zimbabwe Elections Commission, or ZEC, which is supposed to be an independent and non-partisan elections management body, is fully controlled by ZANU PF. It is a ZANU PF project. In the period leading to the 2018 elections, ZEC rejected all demands for electoral reform as recommended in the SADC guidelines for free and fair elections. It's these two strategies, brute violence and rigging elections, that have sustained ZANU PF in power for 42 years. ZANU PF must have learned three lessons pretty well because they are actively practicing them. The first was based on the writings by Machiavelli, an Italian diplomat, philosopher, and historian who lived during the Renaissance. He said in his book, The Prince, that the ruler must not rely on the love of people because people can withdraw their love anytime they want. Instead, the ruler must use brute force to compel obedience. Joseph Stalin, ruler of the Soviet Union, said it's not the people's votes that count, but the people who count the votes that matters. Then there is the China model of economic progress without democracy. All of these three factors have inspired ZANU PF to resort to brute violence and rigging of elections. But the results of a survey conducted by Afrobarometer last year give an insight into why ZANU PF is panicking and taking all steps to stop the CC President Chamisa from visiting rural areas that were once defined as ZANU PF strongholds. What is particularly frightening for ZANU PF is the fact that there is an overwhelming vote of no confidence from both the rural and urban communities. More than 70% of the people surveyed were between the ages of 18 and 45. This made the sample fairly representative, given that more than 70% of the Zimbabwean population is below 30 years of age. The sampled population was also fairly representative in terms of rural and urban populations. Just over 60% or 62.1% of the people surveyed were from rural areas. According to World Bank statistics, 67.76% of the Zimbabwean population lives in rural areas. Nearly 40% or 37.9% of the people surveyed were from urban areas. And according to World Bank statistics, 32.24% of the Zimbabwean population lives in urban areas. A little over half, or 50.4% of the people surveyed were males. According to the World Bank statistics, 47.7% of the Zimbabwean population are males. A little below half, or 49.6% of the people surveyed were females. However, according to World Bank statistics, 52.9% of the Zimbabwean population are females. There were slight disparities in the gender representations in the survey. These three statistics on age, location, and gender make the survey results fairly representative of the views of the 14 million Zimbabweans this year, or 15 million Zimbabweans this year. On his triumphant return to Zimbabwe in 2017, President Mnangagwa once said, "The voice of the people is the voice of God." Well, he would be advised to listen what the Zimbabweans are saying to him. According to the survey results, the people of Zimbabwe are telling Mnangagwa and ZANU PF that they have done a very bad job. If indeed, as he says, the voice of the people of Zimbabwe is the voice of God, then here is what the people are telling Mnangagwa: that he is doing a very bad job. And if that is truly the voice of God, it is a signal that Zimbabweans need a new leadership. According to the survey results, Zimbabweans just do not have any confidence in Mnangagwa. One of the survey questions that Zimbabweans were asked was whether they felt the country was going in the right or wrong direction. Nearly 7 out of 10 Zimbabweans, or 67.4%, said the country is going in the wrong direction. This included 76.9% in rural areas and 67.4% this included 76.9% in urban areas and 67.4% in rural areas. Only 28.9% said the country was going in the right direction. On the economic conditions, more than 70% said the economic conditions in the country were fairly or very bad. This included 78.3% in urban areas and 68.9% in rural areas. More than 60% of the Zimbabweans said they were living in fairly or very bad conditions. This included 64.1% in urban areas and 60.1% in rural areas. More than half, or 53.6% of Zimbabweans, also said their economic conditions had gotten worse or much worse than just 12 months ago. This included 56.4% in urban areas and 60.1% in rural areas. More than half, or 51.4% of Zimbabweans, said they have gone without food all the time, many times, or several times. This included 47.5% in urban areas and 53.9% in rural areas. More than half, or 51.1% of Zimbabweans, said they have gone without enough clean water all the time, many times or several times. This included 62.3% in urban areas and 44.3% in rural areas. More than half, or 54.5% of Zimbabweans, said they have gone without medicines or medical treatment all the time, many times or several times. This included 52.7% in urban areas and 55.6% in rural areas. The message from this survey is loud and clear. ZANU PF has lost almost total support from the Zimbabweans, both in rural and urban areas. A former top ZANU PF official said ZANU PF is now a shadow of its former self. It has no substance. It has no support. ZANU PF has been massively rejected by most Zimbabweans who are bearing the brunt of a country whose economy is in free fall.
This concludes today's broadcast of Letter from America, a weekly in-depth analysis of the situation in Zimbabwe. Thank you for listening. This concludes today's broadcast of Letter from America, a weekly in-depth analysis of the situation in Zimbabwe. Thank you for listening. This concludes today's broadcast of Letter from America, a weekly in-depth analysis of the situation in Zimbabwe. Thank you for listening. This concludes today's broadcast of Letter from America, a weekly in-depth